$150 million deal called for a grand celebration, but a maitre d' who saw only the color of my skin had other plans. What he didn't realize was that I just acquired his entire company. The weight of the deal felt like a pleasant hum under my skin. $150 million acquisition, 9 months of brutal negotiations, sleepless nights, and enough coffee to float a battleship. We'd done it. My team, the best in the business, had pulled a rabbit out of a hat, and tonight was about celebrating. Not with a sterile conference room pizza party, but with an experience. That's why I chose L'Etoile Dorée, a place where the wine list had its own postcode and the steaks were older than some of my junior analysts. I'd made the reservation for 12 myself, a month in advance, for the coveted corner alcove with the skyline view. A confirmation email glowing on my phone screen was my golden ticket. I arrived 10 minutes early, a habit ingrained from my earliest days trying to outwork and outprepare everyone in the room. The charcoal gray of my tailored suit felt like armor, the subtle gleam of my Patek Philippe a quiet testament to the battles won. The hostess stand was manned by a maître d' who looked like he'd been born in a tuxedo. He was tall, thin, with a severe haircut and an air of practiced disdain. "Good evening," I said, my voice warm. "Reservation for Thorne, party of 12. He didn't look up from his massive leather-bound book. He ran a slender finger down the page, his lips pursed. He did it again, slower this time. A small, theatrical sigh escaped him. "I'm afraid I don't see a Thorne here." I kept my smile in place. "That's odd. Perhaps under my first name, Marcus." Another performative scan of the page. No, nothing. "Are you certain it was for tonight?" The question was laced with a suggestion that I, clearly, was the type of person to make such a clumsy error. "I am," I said, the smile tightening slightly. I pulled out my phone, the screen already open to the confirmation email. I held it out. "Right here. L'Etoile Dorée, confirmed for 8 p.m. You can see it's from your official reservations address." He glanced at the phone, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before waving a dismissive hand. "Ah, the online system. It can be temperamental. A glitch, no doubt. Regardless, we are fully committed for the evening. There is nothing I can do." He was already looking past me, his eyes scanning for what he presumably considered a more suitable patron. The calm I prided myself on, the unshakable composure that had seen me through boardrooms filled with sharks, was fraying at the edges. "It's not a glitch," I said, my voice a little colder now. "It's a confirmation. I booked your largest private table a month ago to celebrate a significant achievement with my team." Just then the door opened and a white couple, probably in their late 50s and draped in cashmere, walked in. "So sorry, we're dreadfully late and didn't book," the man announced with a booming, unapologetic laugh. "Any chance you can squeeze 2 in?" The maître d's face transformed. A warm, accommodating smile bloomed on his thin lips. "For you, Mr. Harrington, always. We have a lovely two-top by the window that just opened up. Right this way." He ushered them past me without a second glance. The heat rose in my collar. The air, which moments ago had smelled of truffle oil and opportunity, now felt thick with a familiar, suffocating poison. It wasn't about a glitch in the system. I knew it, he knew it. The unspoken message was crystal clear. My senior project manager, Sarah, arrived then, her face bright with excitement. "Marcus, ready for that $1,000 steak you promised?" Her smile faltered as she took in my rigid posture and the maître d's stony expression as he returned to his post. "We're having a slight issue with the reservation, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice even. "Issue?" David and Kumar, my lead engineers, had arrived behind her. Soon the entire team was assembled in the small, gilded lobby, their celebratory energy slowly deflating as they sensed the tension. The public humiliation was a masterstroke. I was the leader, the man who had just orchestrated a 9-figure deal, and I couldn't even get my team a table for a dinner I had booked weeks ago. I turned back to the maître d'. The last vestiges of my politeness had evaporated. "I am not leaving," I stated, my voice low and dangerous. He seemed to relish the confrontation. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his own voice to a conspiratorial sneer. "Sir, I have told you, we are full. If you continue to cause a scene, I will have to call security. Perhaps a restaurant more suited to your party's style might be found elsewhere." He didn't have to say the words, "your people, your kind." They hung in the air between us, as ugly and obvious as a stain on his pristine white shirt. The blood was pounding in my ears. All those years of work, of being twice as good to get half as far, all culminating in this petty, disgusting power play. He thought he was turning away just another customer. He had no idea who he was talking to. I took a deep, steadying breath, the anger solidifying into something cold and sharp. I looked him dead in the eye. "You know what?" I said, a slow, chilling smile spreading across my face. "Calling security is an excellent idea, but you should probably call your owner first. Tell him Marcus Thorne is here." The maitre d' actually laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "I don't need to bother Mr. Dubois with the likes of you. He trusts my judgment implicitly." My smile widened. It wasn't a pleasant sight. "Oh, I'm sure he does. But see, there's been a recent development. Mr. Dubois doesn't own Le Toit Doré anymore. As of 4:30 p.m. yesterday, his hospitality group was acquired." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the perfumed air, enjoying the first flicker of uncertainty in his smug eyes. I pulled out my phone again, but this time I didn't open my email. I opened a news app and turned the screen to face him. The headline was from a major financial journal. "Vanguard Tech finalizes acquisition of Dubois Holdings International." His face went pale. His eyes darted from the screen to my face, the cogs turning frantically in his head. "Vanguard Tech," I said softly, savoring every word. "That's my company. This $150 million deal my team and I are here to celebrate, it was this one. I'm the executive vice president who signed the papers." I leaned in, my voice barely a whisper. "So I'm not just a customer you're denying a table. I'm the man who signs your checks. Or rather, the man who's about to stop." The blood drained from the maitre d's face, leaving behind a waxy, translucent pallor. His mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish gasping for air on a dock. The leather-bound reservation book slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers and hit the marble floor with a soft, expensive thud. My team, who had been standing in a state of awkward confusion, now stared, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and the dawning, delicious comprehension of what was happening. Sarah's eyes were wide as dinner plates. David let out a low whistle that was quickly stifled. "Monsieur Thorne," the maitre d' finally stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. The practiced Parisian accent had vanished, replaced by the panicked inflection of a man watching his entire life unravel in real time. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I had no idea. If I had known who you were." "That's the entire problem, isn't it?" I cut him off, my voice dangerously soft. It was the voice I used in negotiations right before I gutted an opponent's position. Who I am shouldn't matter. A reservation is a reservation. But you didn't see a customer. You saw a problem. You saw a black man with his team, and you decided we weren't the right clientele. You made a judgment call. And that judgment, I paused, letting the word hang in the air, was poor. He started to babble, a torrent of excuses about stress and pressure and the online system being unreliable. It was pathetic. I held up a hand, and he fell silent instantly, as if I'd flicked a switch. The power dynamic in the small gilded lobby had shifted so completely, it was almost a physical force. He was no longer the gatekeeper of a luxury experience. He was just a man in a suddenly ill-fitting suit, begging for his job. I turned to my team. Their celebratory mood had obviously been shattered, but it was replaced by something else, a raw, unified focus on me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice resonating with authority, "I apologize sincerely for this disruption. The work you did to close this deal was nothing short of brilliant, and you deserve a celebration worthy of that. This place," I gestured vaguely at the opulent room beyond the lobby, "is clearly not it." I saw a flicker of disappointment in a few of their faces. They'd been looking forward to this. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, a plan forming with cold, swift precision. "The celebration is postponed until Monday. I'll be booking out the entire top floor of the Sentinel Hotel for us. Private chefs, open bar, anything you want. Until then, everyone has the rest of the night off. Cars are waiting for you downstairs, all on the company. And check your accounts in the morning. You'll each find a $5,000 bonus for the inconvenience and for having to witness this unprofessionalism." The disappointment vanished, replaced by stunned silence, then a buzz of excitement. This was better than a steak dinner. This was a statement. I was showing them how I handled problems, how I valued them. They began to file out, a series of "Thank you, Marcus" and "See you Monday" trailing behind them. They each shot a final look at the maitre d', a mix of pity and contempt. He had shrunk, physically diminished by his own bigotry. When only Sarah was left, he made one last desperate lunge. "Please, Monsieur Thorne," he begged, his hands clasped together. "My career, my family. I have worked here for 15 years. It was one mistake, a terrible, regrettable mistake." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a cold sense of purpose. Your mistake wasn't being rude to a customer. Your mistake was believing you had the power to decide who was worthy of respect. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw. And it's a flaw that has become a systemic risk to my new investment. I looked past him, to a young hostess who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, terrified eyes. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Chloe, sir," she whispered. "Chloe," I said, giving her a small nod, "please go to every table in this restaurant. Inform the patrons that their bill tonight has been taken care of by the new ownership of Dubois Holdings. Apologize for any disruption and inform them that Le Toit Doré will be closing for the evening in 1 hour for a management transition. Your final task tonight will be to lock these doors behind the last guest." Her eyes widened in disbelief, but she nodded quickly and scurried off to do as she was told. I turned my back on the maitre d' completely, dismissing him from my reality. He was a ghost now, a relic of the old way of doing business. As I walked towards the door, I pulled out my phone and dialed my chief of staff.
Sarah was just ahead of me, holding the door open. She could hear my side of the conversation. "Jessica, I need you to cancel my appointments for the next 3 days," I said, my voice calm and clear. "We have an emergency. I want you to get on a conference call with legal and the heads of HR and operations. The subject is an immediate, top-to-bottom audit of the entire Dubois Holdings portfolio." I paused at the door, the cool night air hitting my face. I could feel Sarah's gaze on me, feel the weight of what I was about to do. This was bigger than one man, one restaurant. It was about the culture of an entire company I now owned. I was about to rip it down to the studs. And Jessica, I added, my voice dropping to an icy resolve. Get me the termination paperwork for a Mr. Jean-Pierre Renaud, effective immediately. And tell HR I want a list of every single discrimination or harassment complaint filed against any Dubois property in the last 5 years. I want it on my desk by 7 a.m. We're just getting started. The drive home was a blur of streetlights painting fleeting stripes across the polished walnut of my Maybach's interior. I didn't see them. My mind was a whirlwind of balance sheets, org charts, and the simmering residual anger from the restaurant. It wasn't the personal insult that fueled me. I'd faced far worse in my life, subtler cuts and more overt slights on my journey up the corporate ladder. No, this was different. This was about an infection. Jean-Pierre Renaud wasn't just a bigoted maitre d'. He was a symptom of a sickness that ran through the veins of my new $150 million acquisition. And like any good CEO, I knew you don't just treat the symptoms, you eradicate the disease. I spent the weekend buried in my home office, fueled by black coffee and a cold, righteous fury. Jessica had worked miracles. By 7 a.m. Saturday, my encrypted server was populated with files that told a story far uglier than I had imagined. The list of complaints was staggering. It wasn't just L'Etoile Dorée. It was across the entire Dubois portfolio. Boutique hotels where Black and Hispanic guests reported being given subpar rooms despite booking suites. Exclusive resorts where staff had lost reservations for same-sex couples. Country clubs with a suspiciously homogeneous membership and a history of complaints from female employees about lecherous senior members being protected by management. It was a cesspool, papered over with luxury branding and 5-star reviews from a carefully curated clientele. Each complaint had been handled in the same way. Quietly settled with a non-disclosure agreement, the employee often fired for performance issues shortly after. The guest offered a voucher and a hollow apology. It was a well-oiled machine designed not to solve problems, but to bury them. The rot came from the top. Pierre Dubois, the former owner, had cultivated a culture of elitist exclusion, and his lieutenants had enforced it with brutal efficiency. By Monday morning, I walked into the Dubois Holdings corporate headquarters not as a new owner, but as an avenging angel in a Brioni suit. The building itself felt like a mausoleum to old money, all dark wood and hushed tones. I'd summoned the entire executive team to the main boardroom at 9 a.m. sharp. 20 men and 3 women, all white, all exuding the same air of comfortable privilege as the maitre d', filed in and took their seats around the massive mahogany table. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, like landed gentry inspecting a new and unpredictable stallion. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table, my tablet in my hand, radiating an energy so intense it seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. "Good morning," I began, my voice flat and devoid of warmth. For those who don't know me, I am Marcus Thorne, Executive Vice President of Vanguard Tech, and as of last week, the new operational head of this portfolio. I had planned to spend this week getting to know you all, understanding the business. Unfortunately, my introduction to the Dubois way happened a little sooner than expected. I let the silence hang for a beat. I could see them exchanging nervous glances. On Friday evening, I continued, I was denied service at one of our flagship properties, L'Etoile Dorée. My team and I were publicly humiliated by a staff member who decided, based on nothing more than the color of my skin, that we were not welcome. A few of them shifted uncomfortably. One man, the COO, a portly fellow named Gerald, actually had the audacity to speak. "Marcus, let me be the first to apologize for that employee's inexcusable behavior. He has, of course, been terminated. It was an isolated incident, I assure you, completely unrepresentative of our values." I turned my full attention to him, my eyes like ice chips. "Isolated, Gerald? Is that what you call it?" I tapped my tablet, and the main screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. On it was a spreadsheet.
A very, very long spreadsheet. This, I said, my voice rising with controlled power, is a list of 284 formal complaints filed across your properties in the last 5 years, all alleging discrimination based on race, gender, or sexual orientation. I can see 37 of them were directed at L'Étoile Dorée alone. And I see here, I scrolled down the list, that the name Jean-Pierre Renaud appears as the subject of 9 of those complaints. Tell me, Gerald, at what point does an isolated incident become a pattern? At what point does a pattern become a culture? The silence in the room was absolute. The color had drained from Gerald's face. They stared at the screen, at the damning evidence of their collective failure laid bare. Every single one of these complaints, I said, pacing slowly behind my chair, was buried, settled, swept under a very expensive rug. The victims were silenced with NDAs. The perpetrators were protected. Business as usual. Well, I'm here to tell you that business as usual is over. The Dubois way is dead. I stopped pacing and placed my hands flat on the table, leaning forward. Vanguard Tech did not acquire a company to continue its legacy of bigotry and exclusion. We acquired assets, real estate, and brand potential. The culture, however, is a liability we are writing off, starting today. Effective immediately, the entire senior management team of L'Étoile Dorée is terminated. The restaurant is closed indefinitely for a complete staff and management restructuring. Gasps rippled through the room. This was an earthquake. Furthermore, I wasn't finished. I have frozen all executive bonuses pending the results of a full, independent third-party audit of every HR file and guest complaint in this company's history. Anyone found to have enabled, participated in, or covered up discriminatory practices will be gone. No golden parachute, no soft landing, just a cardboard box and a security escort out of the building. I looked around the table, meeting the terrified eyes of each person. They finally understood. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to clean house. Your first assignment under new ownership is to cooperate fully with the auditors. My chief of staff will be in touch to schedule interviews. That is all. The dismissal was stark, absolute. They rose slowly, as if in a daze, and began to file out of the room, whispering amongst themselves. They were scared. Good. They should be. Only one person remained. A woman who had sat silently at the far end of the table, her face a mask of composure. She was Catherine Moreau, the head of marketing. She was known for her brilliant, award-winning campaigns that had built the Dubois brand into a symbol of unattainable luxury. She walked towards me, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice steady, "that was quite a performance." It wasn't a performance, Ms. Moreau. It was a statement. "I understand," she said, stopping a few feet from me. There was something in her eyes, an intelligence and intensity that set her apart from the others. "You're burning it all down. It's bold. It's also reckless. You're about to destroy a brand identity I've spent 2 decades building." "The brand identity was a lie," I countered, "and a brand built on a lie is worthless." She gave a small, wry smile. "Perhaps, but you're missing something. You're focused on the past, on the rot. You haven't considered who planted the seeds." She opened her leather portfolio and slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table towards me. "You fired Gerald and the others, but they were just following orders. If you really want to kill the disease, you have to go after the source. The real power behind Pierre Dubois was never Pierre himself." I looked down at the paper. It wasn't a document. It was a photograph. A candid shot of Pierre Dubois on a yacht, laughing with another man. A man I recognized instantly. He was one of the most powerful, untouchable men in the city. A man who sat on the boards of half a dozen Fortune 500 companies, a celebrated philanthropist, and, most importantly, the majority shareholder of the largest media conglomerate on the East Coast. A man who could destroy my reputation with a single phone call. Underneath the photo, a name was typed in simple block letters, Alastair Finch. Catherine looked at me, her expression a challenge. Finch was the silent partner, the one who set the tone. He believes in a certain purity of the brand. Your little crusade is about to make a very, very powerful enemy, Mr. Thorne. Are you sure you're ready for that war? I stared at the photograph of Alastair Finch, his face crinkled in a jovial laugh that now seemed predatory. The name hit me like a physical blow. Catherine Moreau hadn't just handed me a piece of information, she'd handed me a declaration of war. Finch wasn't just a powerful man, he was an institution, woven into the very fabric of the city's financial and social elite. He was a kingmaker and a career breaker. Going after the managers was one thing. Going after Finch was like trying to punch the ocean. "Thank you, Miss Moreau," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I slid the photo back into her portfolio. "Your point is well taken. Are you telling me this because you're loyal to him or because you're loyal to the brand?" A flicker of respect entered her eyes. "The brand was my life's work," she said coolly. "I believe in what it could be, not what it was. What Finch and Dubois built was a gilded cage. I'd rather see it become a fortress. You seem to have the will to do that, but will alone won't beat a man like Alastair Finch. He doesn't lose." "Everyone loses eventually," I replied. "You can go now, Miss Moreau. I'll be in touch." She gave a curt nod and left, leaving me alone in the silent, cavernous boardroom. The fight had just escalated beyond my wildest imagination. This wasn't about a restaurant anymore. It was about tearing down an idol. For the next week, I worked with a singular, obsessive focus. The independent auditors, a firm I trusted implicitly, descended on Dubois Holdings like a swarm of locusts, devouring files and data. I put Catherine Moreau in charge of a brand reinvention task force, a clear signal that she had chosen her side. Her inside knowledge was invaluable, helping us navigate the labyrinthine corporate structure Dubois and Finch had created. The expected counterattack came 4 days later. It started with a whisper campaign in the financial press. Anonymous sources close to the Dubois acquisition were expressing concern about my aggressive and disruptive management style. An op-ed appeared in the city's leading financial newspaper, owned, of course, by Finch's media conglomerate, questioning Vanguard Tech's wisdom in putting a tech executive with a social agenda in charge of a delicate luxury brand. It was a classic Finch play, death by 1,000 paper cuts, undermining my credibility before I could even land a punch. But Finch underestimated me. He saw me as a diversity hire who got lucky, a corporate activist. He didn't see the street fighter from Queens who had clawed his way into rooms he was never meant to enter. He thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I was ready to flip the whole board over. The auditors delivered the smoking gun late on a Thursday night. It was an email chain buried deep in a deleted server archive they had painstakingly recovered. It was between Alastair Finch and Pierre Dubois, dating back 3 years ago. They were discussing a lawsuit from a former employee at one of their Florida resorts, a young black woman who alleged she was fired for reporting the sexual harassment of a high-profile guest, a guest who was a personal friend of Finch's. Finch's instructions were brutally clear. "Bury this," he wrote. "Pay her whatever it takes for the NDA. Make sure her career in hospitality is over. Our brand is about aspiration. Our guests pay to be in a world without complications. It was the word complications that sealed his fate. It was the same dehumanizing, dismissive language used by the Montre. It was the DNA of the rot, the source code of the bigotry that permeated the entire company. And I had it in writing. The next morning, I didn't leak the email to a friendly journalist. That was Finch's game, a game of shadows. I was going to bring it into the blinding light. I called an all-hands press conference at the Vanguard Tech Tower. I didn't just invite the financial press, I invited everyone. Local news, national outlets, online bloggers, social justice advocates. I stood at a podium not as a corporate executive, but as a man who had been wronged and had discovered he was one of many. I began by telling my own story, the story of what happened at l'Etoile Dorée. I didn't posture or rage, I just laid out the facts, the humiliation, the dismissal. Then I broadened the scope, detailing the systemic pattern of discrimination the audit had uncovered. I announced the creation of a $10 million restitution fund for the victims of Dubois Holdings' past practices, and a complete overhaul of our hiring and training protocols to be overseen by a new Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. I was transforming my new asset from a symbol of exclusion to a beacon of reform. And then, with the cameras flashing and the room utterly silent, I went after the king. This culture of poison, I said, my voice ringing with conviction, did not happen by accident. It was designed, and the architect was a man who has hidden in the shadows of this company for years, a man whose name is synonymous with power and influence in this city, Mr. Alastair Finch. I put the emails up on the giant screen behind me. I read Finch's words aloud. The sound of 100 keyboards clicking in unison was deafening. I didn't just accuse him, I convicted him in the court of public opinion with his own words. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Finch's carefully constructed world shattered. The boards he sat on called emergency meetings. The charities he patronized began distancing themselves. The media empire he controlled couldn't spin this. The story wasn't about a disgruntled executive. It was about incontrovertible proof of his moral bankruptcy. By the end of the day, his resignation from 3 major boards was announced. By the end of the week, he was a pariah. 3 months later, I stood on the renovated top floor of the Sentinel Hotel. It was the postponed celebration for my team. The room was filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. The view of the skyline was even better than the one at l'Etoile Dorée. I had brought on Chloe, the young hostess from the restaurant, as a management trainee in our new hospitality division. Sarah raised a glass to me from across the room, her smile bright and genuine. Catherine Moreau approached me, a glass of champagne in her hand. "The new brand is polling through the roof," she said, a note of wonder in her voice. "We're being hailed as the new model for corporate responsibility. L'Etoile Dorée is set to reopen next month. We have a 3-month waiting list. Everyone wants to be a part of the story." "It was always a good story," I said, looking out at the city lights. "It just needed a new narrator." The deal had been $150 million, but what I had truly acquired was something priceless. It was the power to not just open doors that were closed to me, but to tear the whole damned building down and build something better, something worthy in its place. And that was a victory that tasted sweeter than any $1,000 steak.